Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is Neil Rydell. Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy EV miniseries. Neil, welcome back.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I am doing well. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We're going to talk to a gentleman that I met while I was in Boston at a clean tech roundtable, and I was excited enough to say, hey, he'd probably be a great fit for this EV miniseries. So I'm kind of looking forward to this conversation.
Cool, sounds great. Who are we speaking to?
So we have David Lewis on board. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you both.
So, David, I just let the audience know that I met you in Boston, that I met you and I didn't give them any more information. So let's start the interview by who are you professionally and what it is you do?
Who am I professionally? I love that. Um, let's catch up a little bit and then we can jump into what I do. I guess who am I professionally? I usually like to start with I grew up working in a restaurant. So grew up working a lot, really understand hand to mouth. Historical memory is, picking up waitresses when their car breaks down and understanding how expensive those bills can be. Progressed from there to University of Vermont. Then I got, I watched Boiler Room a few too many times, and I got a job on Wall Street working on a big trading floor for Citi. Kind of cut my teeth there. Went through their investment banking program, then went through RBC's investment banking program, and ended up syndicating a lot of debt. That was my specialty for about 10 years. Then I went to Columbia for business school and got super lucky when I got out and capped my tenure in New York and moved to Boston to join a company called Modus. Modus is the largest vehicle reimbursement company in the world. It's an alternative to fleet. At that company, I was vice president of strategy and was responsible for things like M&A, partnerships, platform growth, and kind of became very interested in all the cost inputs to driving, how to save people money. And one of the things that I'm focused on, what got me today, is generally fuel's about 30% the cost, total cost of ownership. So there's a lot of waste there. And then since then, I founded this company where I am today, MoveEV. And we focus on saving people money on gas, saving them 25% of their personal emissions, where their kids play baseball, and helping to accelerate this move into electric vehicles.
So I'm going to pick you up on something, David. I don't really believe in luck. So you said you got super lucky, but can you tell us a bit more about what made you super lucky? Because I'm convinced that you did something clever.
Oh, thank you. Well, to make a longer story, Mile IQ had just sold to Microsoft for a bunch of money, so it was in the newspaper, and I was at Columbia Business School at the time, and I was trying to figure out, you know, what was I going to do next. I had a gluten-free burger place in the middle there, but we'll get to that over beers. But I was trying to figure out what was I going to do next, and I really wanted to learn how to be an operator, right? I'd financed lots of businesses. I mean, billions and billions of dollars passed through us, but I had never been an operator. And I got presented this opportunity from the CEO of Modus at the time to look at the market. So I spent a month before I took the job really defining the market for his product. And we realized that we thought the market was growing exponentially for reimbursement versus fleet. And what I mean by that is historically in this country, if you drive a lot for work in a sales capacity, you're provided by the company a fleet vehicle, a fuel card, and everything is taken care of. However, in researching this, I don't always believe in that model, right? There's a lot of capital expenditure waste, in my opinion, in that model. Also, it opens up the employer to night and weekend risk of the employee, which, if you research driver safety in this country, is when 70% of major motor vehicle accidents happen, which is also, we can go down a whole driver safety thing. I have a whole another half hour for you on that. Um, but to circle back, I just saw that there was only two competitors in the space. I thought that Modus had better technology, and I was given the opportunity to be the third leg of a stool. It was me, the CEO, and the CFO, always carrying a bag, raising money, driving growth, and really expand. I mean, the whole business, just blew up over the next 5 years. We got bought by Thoma Bravo in the middle of it, and Premier just announced a transaction a while ago. Um, and so I say I got lucky is because I joined a successful entity where I was able to contribute and grow, where I was given the ability to stretch myself and really build out my skill set and sort of learn how to exist in the uncertainty of hyper growth, where I had sort of grown up in very stable businesses like restaurants, which you can argue is stable. My dad had business for 25 years, very stable business, or finance, where, bankers are always figuring out how to make money, right?
So this says that electric vehicles seem to be an obvious theme to you. I mean, I don't know the US particularly well. We're starting to see those early signs of hyper growth for electric vehicles here in the UK. Is the US going through the same transition?
Yeah, so this is where I get really excited, right? And why we founded MoveEV. So the answer is yes, but not as fast, right? And so I became hyper focused on figuring out, are electric vehicles cheaper, better, faster? And I found out yes. And then I was studying, why are we lagging Europe? Why are we lagging all these other countries, Norway, and especially the UK, in EV adoption? So I then went on a journey to learn. And I work with consultants across Europe to really build my skill set around what's working there. Came across programs like salary sacrifice, um, and started to really the nuts and bolts of why EVs work. And so, I felt that I was uniquely qualified as sort of a mobility expert to start this company and start to solve what I see the problem here is that we just need to build this into the culture. And that's how we'll accelerate adoption. And the way that MoveEV does that is by partnering with corporations and municipality to look at all of their vehicles across their scopes, vehicles they own, all the way to vehicles that are just commuting to work or owned by an employee.
So, what exactly, when you partner, what are they doing? Is there software that you've put together? Is it consulting services? What is MoveEV offering your customer?
We offer both. So what we find is our clients are really ready to learn a lot and kind of rethink some of the things that they've been doing. But and we've built some great software, but software is usually a next step, right? More times we're still identifying what is the problem here today, right? And we're showing them a very big problem, right? When we start talking about commuting emissions. And commuting emissions, especially for office workers, are generally the vast majority of their emissions, certainly their contributed emissions. There's a Sun Microsystem study that was done in the 90s that showed a 80% attribution from such employees. And so as you can tell, I'm just kind of helping you build the mosaic that helped me, bring clarity to what the problem is and what the most important solutions are. And so what
So, but
go ahead, sorry.
yeah, but today, so someone comes to you and goes, "Move EV. I've looked at your website. I'm trying to figure out, how I can reduce our corporate emissions or my employees, help them out along the EV trail." What's the engagement look like? How am I engaging with you? Is it talking to David or is it talking to a team? What's happening?
Yeah, we have a team locally and then internationally because this is a global problem and we started day one with a global solution. And you'll notice that like fleet management is very geographically focused. So what this looks like is we gather all of your information. We say, do you know what's going on today in all the regions and you operate? And generally, we get mixed results. So we go through, we take in all of your information across your vendors, right? There might be 20 different places, 30 different places information is coming from. Then we write you a compendium about everything that's going on today, right? And then we overlay our expertise against industry benchmarks where you can improve today. And we're looking at cost savings, operational improvements, and emissions reductions. Okay. And then from there, we can have a real conversation about what are your options. But until we baseline level set you, it's a complete unknown. And if you see the disparate stakeholders that are involved in gathering all this data across HR, procurement, sales, um, it's no wonder it hasn't been done before, right?
And one of the things I picked up through your website was you're obviously looking at scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Can you just talk us through that and tell us a little bit about what the story means when you convert certain vehicles across from petrol and diesel into electric and how that changes the scope and the impact?
What a great question. Okay, scope one are assets you own. I'm trying to keep it simple. Scope one assets you own. I own this fleet vehicle. This fleet vehicle drives around to visit a bunch of doctors' offices during the day. Then he parks it in his garage, right? He goes to bed, he wakes up, that guy gets in his fleet vehicle, drives it around again. That's scope one, you own the vehicle, right? So we cover those, and that can be vehicles big and small depending on the business, right? And so generally those are measured in a progressive company. And in a very progressive company, they're trying to mitigate them. Scope one, my first priority, scope one. I don't agree with that, but I think that's how they're perceived in the market. Scope two is energy I buy, right? So I'm buying energy to perhaps run my electric vehicle. If you were to convert, that'd be scope two. But the way people think about scope two is buying energy. The example that always gets said is I own a factory, I buy electricity for that factory. The emissions created from creating that electricity is my scope two. And those are perceived to be easily measurable and easily mitigated with money, right? And generally your electric company can help you with those. And so I'm telling a story of uh, we get progressively further away from your sphere of influence and abilities to throw money at the problem. Okay. Scope three is way out here and includes all things in your supply chain. So if you buy widgets from China that are shipped in a barge, then driven to your warehouse, that's scope three. Those are considered very difficult to manage, very difficult to influence, right? And most companies are avoiding them today. However, there's a golden one that we focus on, and that is commuting to work. We specifically focus on commuting to work alone in your car, because even though it's way out here, with our programs, your corporation or municipality can influence them, right? And why we love scope three commuting to work is that we always use this Amazon example. Is it okay if I use an Amazon example?
Yeah.
So Amazon made this incredible commitment to buy all these Rivian vans, and it is amazing. $700 million. If you do some back of the napkin math, it's about $70,000 a van. There's a huge green premium on that thing relative to a white Ford van, right? So let's just say it's 70 grand to stop those emissions, okay, for 15 years, the useful life of that vehicle, okay? 70 grand or a $35,000 premium. Then Amazon also has 1 million people drive into packaging places in pickup trucks. And those pickup trucks are built on the same chassis, get the same MPGs as the white van that Rivian is replacing. And what we like to say is like, it's great you work on the vans, but let's also work on those employees, because the federal government is paying your premium for you. And so however you get them in to drive an EV so that they can save $3,000 a year on gas, which I think is the best socioeconomic thing you can do for any human being, which is why we're doing this, is get them to stop paying for gas and paying for electricity, right? All you have to do is get them to do that, and that is not going to cost you $35,000, and it's not going to cost you $70,000. And so if you really care about reducing emissions where your kids play baseball, could make sense to focus a little bit on those 1 million people driving to work and not the 10,000 vans. But both are
So
great. Sorry. Both are incredible. Amazon is incredible for making that commitment.
how does this work in so you got ESG and you got all these buzzwords that people are doing in corporate America these days. You're saying it doesn't cost them money to put a program like this in place. So explain a little bit of the logistics. I'm a Fortune 1000 company or Fortune 100 company, and I engage moving EV. Why and how do I make this work to get my employees there?
So there's tons of ROI. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this. It has to make common sense for everybody. But there's a million ways to think about the ROI. So we administer a program that basically helps the end user understand what's going on in their driving life today, right? So we built a proprietary survey tool that helps you allow your employees to be part of your energy transition, right? Basically, we want to help facilitate for a company. We want everyone driving electric vehicles. We've partnered with MoveEV to make this as simple and easy for you as possible. It begins, and it's about togetherness and MoveEV meant, right? That we're all in this together because there is a greater benefit. What's so great about it is everyone saves money on gas. So it's just a cost saving thing in my mind, and then everyone benefits from fewer emissions. You hire us, we start with the survey, we baseline you again, right? And then we continue. Then the end user gets fed back their own user. They're in their own portal now, learning about their driving life. And just like we talked about me teaching in high schools, we teach them, hey, these are the actual total cost of ownership of your car, which I know 95% of the population is not aware of, right? Especially when gas is up 2.5 times. So think about the environment of the last year and think about it, half the population in the US living paycheck to paycheck and then having to come out an extra $1,500 for gas, right? So, and then we help the folks sort of like learn and understand what's available to them in terms of incentives. We give them an outlet to speak with one of our service members should they have actual questions, because not everyone purchases stuff on their phone. I do want to say we do not sell cars, right? We are not in the business of selling cars. We are in the business of facilitating change and helping people save money and save emissions. Why it's great for the corporate, for those that are genuinely interested in reducing emissions, is that each vehicle that drives to work is about 3 tons of emissions based on the census and average commuting patterns. And so the math that got me excited was commuting to work alone in your car is about 10% of all emissions in this country. And why am I so passionate about this is because I feel like we can have an effect on 10% of emissions in the country. And then if you factor in personal driving, it's more like 15%. And then it's just saving money for every emission you reduce.
So just I'm the master of the not so bright question because um and I'm so you take, let's say there's a million white pickup trucks driving to work and they're the same chassis and they're the gas, and you go there and you start getting people to convert to EVs. So you've helped them find incentives or financial way to make it happen. But aren't those million pickup trucks still on the road, just driven by someone else? So did the problem go away?
You know, again, just like such a brilliant question. And it is all about useful life. And so that's why we feel it's so important that those new cars that be sold are EV, right? Because that does prevent one from entering the market. Because stated another way, parroting it back to you another way, you take a new gas car off the lot, you've birthed it and guaranteed, because we live in America, that that thing is going to drive until it's scrapped. And so you're committing to 55 metric tons of carbon, even if you drive it for a week. So I'm agreeing with your point. And that's why Massachusetts, another impetus for me starting the company, is Governor Baker announced almost 2 years ago that he was going to ban the sale of gas cars here in 2035. So there's a line in the sand. And Massachusetts, where we're located, is prepared to lead the way. There's so much state money available to move this forward here, and the attitudes and the urgency is palpable.
What's the benefit an individual? So I work at one of these companies you're at, perhaps. So we've signed up for the Move EV program. I get some education. Help me understand. So you help them figure out the costs. Are there incentives that they're going after? Or you're helping them uncover, federal and state incentives to help make this in a budget of someone, or is the corporation helping them finance the vehicle differently? How's that happening? Because EVs do seem to be fairly expensive still. They're getting better. So how's the average employee?
David, in your view, how is the transition happening in the US? What are the vehicles doing? How are they changing? And where do you see this? How do you see the US catching up with Europe and driving ahead of Europe?
Again, what a great question. So in my mind, the way we catch up with Europe is by getting corporations and municipalities involved at scale. And I think the way to really do that is through benefits programs, right? And so what we're trying to do at MoveEV is level the access to the education about the vehicles, about total cost of ownership, about gas, and also about incentives so that the everyman can make an educated financial decision. And there's a lot in there, right? Because we are plugging education gaps, but we feel that we have the empathy, the software, and the humans to help folks make the change. The way that we really accelerate, folks only get a chance to buy a car every 3 to 5 years in this country, right? So it's important that when they do get into a new car, that they've had the time to think about the decision and order the vehicle in an appropriate time frame to get the vehicle and help solve a supply chain issue. That's something we can go deeper into what we're doing. But how we really, by sort of equalizing access to education and access to the equipment at more and more affordable prices is happening right now as these models are released. We feel that the same thing, it's going to happen very quickly, similar to what happened with Henry Ford and sort of the proliferation of the middle class having gas vehicles by corporates creating this culture of electric vehicles are part of our future. We feel that we can help the middle adopt much faster, and then that will create the impetus for change. The total cost of ownership question always comes up. There's just things people reflectively say. And so one is they're expensive. And I would say relative to what? My best day is when I have a conversation with a teacher who's making $54,000 a year, right? And driving a Camry to work, is that we put her in a Bolt. She never goes to the gas station, is not late for dinner, and she saves $3,500 a year on gas. She also gets a check from the government for $7,500 and a $3,500 check from the state, and we change her life. So I studied poverty and debt in this country when I was working on a driver safety platform about 5 years ago. And so I understand the financial impact of vehicles generally, certainly when you get into an accident. And so we just want to put this teacher who's just looking for a decent experience on the way to work into a car that requires less maintenance, less cost of gas, and $10,000 in total benefits from the state and federal governments.
And one of the things that you've touched on a couple of times here is the total cost of ownership. And you've kind of just described it, but for listeners who aren't familiar with that concept, can you just break it down a little bit further? You know, we talked about expensive vehicles, we talked about expensive fuel and maintenance. Can you break down that total cost of ownership that you teach people?
Yeah, so we sometimes reference a slide. If you look at the Bureau of Transportation, put out a great slide that's total cost of ownership for the average U.S. vehicle over the last 15 or 20 years. They have it. Over the last 5 years, it's increased by 21%. And so, when you thought a vehicle is going to cost you $8,000, sort of when you purchased it, it ended up costing you 10. That's a big swing for the average American that has, $6,000 or $16,000 of credit card debt, right? So what we focus on, and the reason why folks get in a debt in the first place is you go to a car dealership, you're all pumped up, you end up getting a car generally that's more expensive. Regardless, you're aware of your car payment. So let's say the average car payment in this country is about $424. Okay, so that's your car payment. And that's what you think it costs you to drive your car, because you just kind of casually go to the gas station once or twice a week and you sort of put 30, 40, or $50 in there, but it's not really, part of the car. Like you're getting a couple $100 oil change. I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's petty cash. But when you add up that petty cash, right, you end up spending on average around $2,800 a year on gas, and then you're spending, $500-600 a year on maintenance. And it's also costing you a lot of time because you're going to the gas station, which might be your favorite place because you're going 52 to 100 times a year. Maybe you love it there. But basically, you have to factor in the 424, right? Then you have to factor in, let's call it at least $200 a month for gas. And you realize that basically in your gas and your maintenance, you have another car payment, right? And so if you actually know that, then let's say the person's now spending maybe close to $600-700 a month in total cost of ownership over that 424. That's the real cost. There are several electric vehicles that you can lease or finance in some way that you can come in at a lower payment and also include your electric bill. The thing that I focus mostly on is how you make it a car has a lot of ego involved in it, right? So we can debate that, but we try to just get you into a car that you like, and we just try to focus on saving you money on gas.
One thing in the US, and Tesla went through this in its early days, is the dealership network, right? So you talked about the car buying experience, and I now live in Europe for the time being, and it's a very different experience here. But in the US, I mean, it's a fine machine. You go in, they're going to pre-sell you service, they're going to go to get the finance guy. There's a whole machine that's designed to get the most out of anyone that walks in the door to the max of their credit limit, right? When you walk in. Um, do you see that needing to change? And do you see with EVs that same dealer network and service department kind of infrastructure is still necessary? I know it's there because it's there, but does that need to
So,
change as well?
well, I just want to note, and I'm not going to go too deep, but how predatory you made that sound. And I'm going to say that generally, I think it's like, I don't know what the worst
You bought a
experience,
car in the US, and
right?
it does feel predatory. I'm not going to back away from that. It feels
and
extremely
and I
predatory.
don't think you have to. And I think what a lot of people don't. What's the symptom of that? The symptom of that is 80% of the population buy a car when the car breaks or their lease is up, so they're already very vulnerable and likely to make poor financial decisions because there's a lot of time pressure on them. So we try to help with that. In terms of, do I think the car purchasing model is changing in the U.S.? Yes, I do. A lot of the OEMs have said their electric vehicle sales are going to be strictly online. And I think that that opens up for a much better customer experience, as long as, with working with us or with others, they get the chance to feel comfortable at the car again in a in a non-predatory way, with no commission or commission pressure on anyone. Learning about, the goods and bads of owning an electric vehicle. There are some negatives, right? I can't think of many, but yes, I think it's changing. That's something we think is also sort of wind in our sails, because we think it will be less common to go in a normal way. And then if you do any market testing, like we just did this the other day, the head of marketing was here. We went to a few dealerships. Most sales reps there don't know much about the electric vehicles that the dealership offers, just generally, and also, you know, not um, highly aware of what qualifies for incentives and what doesn't. And so, even in a normal process, we feel that there's a lot of helpful information we can share with our ultimate, partners and friends, as we like to think about it. I think, we feel like we're providing a very necessary service that's sort of filling a bunch of legacy gaps in this whole model that don't make sense. And we think that it's just important to take the pressure. Thank you for bringing this up, Chris, actually, to take the pressure off people in this experience. And the way that our software allows you to do that is it allows you to plan way ahead, right? So you're not surprised by a date. You're not surprised by a date when you need to make a decision, and whether that's to order the vehicle, have it delivered, or claim your benefits. We're trying to de-stress that whole situation for you with software and prompts.
This conversation wouldn't be fair if I didn't at some point bring up electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I think one of the things that has caused a lot of frustration, particularly over the last 3 to 6 months in the UK, is the level of reliability, the queues that are starting to emerge, and the rollout of that infrastructure. But I genuinely don't have a clue what's going on in the US when it comes to infrastructure. Could you tell us more about the charging infrastructure and how that's impacting the transition over in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as like the opportunity of a generation to sort of rebuild infrastructure that was built a long time ago, with different technologies available at the time that were great, but maybe there's improved solutions now. Um, since you asked, we're actually leading a task force driven by the Advanced Energy Group. That's a cohort of industry experts to figure out exactly this. How do we ready the infrastructure, especially in environmental justice communities, in a budget-friendly way that can help make sure that we are ready for mass adoption. I think that's a long-term problem. I mean, we can, you know, there's pretty high ownership, home ownership in this country. Certainly by geography, you can find places with home ownership. And at MoveEV, we're not advocating for mass adoption today, right? We're just trying to empathetically make everyone aware that mass adoption is going to start to happen over the next 10 years, 15 years. And so let's start playing now. Let's start getting the low hanging fruit that we can take advantage of, put those people in cars a little bit faster, simultaneously give us time to improve the infrastructure, and also the opportunity to really improve air quality issues in environmental justice areas. And also, if we do this appropriately, make sure that in those areas specifically, that they aren't left behind in this transition because they've been thought of ahead of time. And there's tremendous amounts of money in the IRA for that. And that is part of our exploration.
So, speaking of the IRA, how does that impact what you're doing? I mean, there's a lot going on, right? And as you said, that it goes to different communities, and there's a lot of consideration there. The legislation hasn't been around that much. It was people saw it coming, so it wasn't a surprise. Like you said, like buying a car, you can plan for it. How has it impacted your organization?
Hugely. I mean, it's just happening now. Like the federal government wants you to drive an electric vehicle so badly that they're going to give you 7,500 bucks, right? And then you get to save $3,000 every year on gas. And so think about if we do this when we start with a client is we show them the impact of their investment in us, right? And that's what if literally every employee that has a car saved $3,000 a year? What would they do with that money? Hopefully, some of them would save for important things. A lot of them would also spend that money locally, right?
So, but a ridiculous point, but a point that I've heard made. So the current, and it certainly not an argument I'm making, but I've heard it before. The current infrastructure to maintain mechanics and all the people behind the scenes to keep the current combustion engine operation in there is a lot of employed people. So where do they go? Because my EV doesn't go into the shop near as much in theory, right? It doesn't have as many moving parts. It shouldn't break down as much. So what happens to all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think they evolve and adapt. Again, I don't think this is an overnight change. I think this is something that is going to happen over time. I like to think that, I mean, especially in America, you're kind of like, you're supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think part of why we want to make the idea that this is coming so obvious is that folks like that can try to get the education that they need to move forward. There's going to be a lot of jobs created, right, as well, like in terms of charging infrastructure repair. There's this awesome school by us, to make a plug, called Benjamin Franklin, that trains folks to be wind turbine repair folks, and I believe they're starting a charging repair program here. um, and I think that we just need to learn and adapt. I think that there will be a reskilling that needs to take place. But when I look at my own career, I've been reskilling this whole time myself. So um, I think there'll be challenges, but I think there'll also be opportunities for those that embrace it early to win.
Cool. Neil, we're kind of starting.
So, David, you've taken us on quite a journey. You've taken us from the beginnings of your career, and what I would add, you suggested lucky. I would say you grafted, you studied, and you've created, in many ways, a little oasis of knowledge which you're looking to share with others. You've talked about, understanding your driving life today. I thought that was a really cool concept, helping people explore what they should already know, but making it easy for them to understand. And then you've taken us through an incredible fact which blew my mind, which is 10% of emissions in the US are from commuting, and comes up to 15% when you include personal miles. That's enormous. That's a great space to be exploring. I guess one of the things I'm interested in is, you talked about, people making educated decisions. What was your decision about what vehicle you drive? What decision did you make?
So it's such a great question. So I did put a lot of thought into this. I acquired my first electric vehicle think about 24 months ago now, before I started the business, because I really needed to know, right? And so the car I acquired at the time, again, this is the first car I've ever purchased for work. And the purpose of this car for work was to be exciting to folks, to get them to want to drive it, be in it, play around with it. And you'll see in some of the schoolwork we do, we use it a lot to excite children. I wanted it to be a car that was affordable for sort of the traveling pharmaceutical sales rep that makes over $100,000 a year, but not like the ultra high worth people. And so, and I want it to fit me because I'm a big guy, right? You can't see it on screen, but I'm 6'3", I'm over 200 pounds. I historically have back problems. And I needed some cargo space because I have 2 little girls, right? And they have car seats. And so the car that I chose was a Tesla Model Y. It was the first year they made the car. The reasons that I bought the car then are not necessarily the reasons that I don't know if I'd make the same choice today. I love the vehicle. I bought the vehicle because it was under $50,000, and that made me eligible for a state check. I got a check for $2,500 from the state of Massachusetts, but only because I filed it 3 months after purchase. I just want to make that note for anyone listening. So under $49,000. So at the time, it was an attainable car. It went over 300,000 miles. At the time, I still had range anxiety. I would argue you don't need 300 miles, but I do like that. And then I wanted the charging infrastructure because my wife and I take trips to Vermont and whatnot. And I have to say, I really enjoy the car. It's performed incredibly well. It's the first car I've ever owned that was worth more money after I purchased it than when I bought it. So that was pretty cool. And I do think it's an incredible vehicle.
Awesome. I thank you so much for sharing with us today on the podcast. It's been an interesting journey. Thanks for being our guest.
It's my pleasure. I love the work that you're doing. Please keep it up, and looking forward to more.
For our guests, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Insider's Guide to Energy EV mini series. I hope it provided a glimpse of what kind of difference folks can make and what's happening in North America with the EV market. Tune in again for our next episode of Insider's Guide to Energy EV mini series. We'll talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with your friends. Bye-bye.